And this is going to be the next talk. Next, we're going to address standards, outcomes, what in a global sense, if the goal is to take abnormal anatomy and make normal anatomy, well, how often is that being accomplished and how often should it be accomplished? So you see the details of that, and he's going to talk to us about training from the standpoint of commercial pilots, because that's what he does. So I think it's a really interesting lesson with a different perspective than ours when you look at training and teaching and all from the standpoint of the airline industry and compare and contrast that to what we do in surgical training. So somebody's just making the comment that maybe glans fusion isn't the term, but I won't argue about whether you want to use fusion or closure or what term you want to use. There is clearly in normal anatomy, as Mr. Hutton showed in his study, a distance between the distal or the proximal lip of the meatus and the corona, and that's glans tissue. And if somebody wants to name that something else, well, that's fine. But we chose to use glans fusion because that's kind of what we're doing in surgery. And Mr. Hutton chose to use glans closure because those patients, that's what they had naturally closed. Yeah.
All right, so another question says, Mr. Hutton's paper tells us that the glans closure can be just below the mid-glans level to be normal. Is there any distal hypospadias in which you would do a different technique than tip? Example, just do a glansplasty without urethroplasty.
Well, we've done that. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have some patients, more often in people with dehiscence, where the urethra was fine and we just had to redo the glans. But yeah, I mean, if the urethra is satisfactory, but there's inadequate glans closure, you could do that. I don't think that really happens very much in a primary case.
No, we would. No. I mean, still, even for ones that kind of just have some of that really thin epithelium, but the glans wings are clearly separated and it's tissue paper thin below that, you can occasionally see that. Those patients will often do just an interrupted suture or two for the urethroplasty portion, but still a three-stitch glansplasty closure. So that is how we do that.
I've got a question, Warren.
Yes.
Sometimes the parents are slightly more concerned about the dorsal hooded foreskin than they are about what's going on ventrally. And some patients come to hemicircumcision. Some of those might have a normal position meatus and a normal ventral closure, but some might have a minor degree of hypospadias. And the parents didn't want to proceed with, a urethroplasty because of the risk of fistula and maybe glans dehiscence, and they just wanted it looking more normal because they didn't like we don't know what the child would have liked if they were an adult, but the parents didn't like the hooded foreskin. So I used to do a hemicircumcision, but to make sure in those patients that I was confident the urethral stream was fine and it wasn't directed ventrally and going to go down onto his glutes as an adult, I used to pop a feeding tube down the urethra, fill the bladder up with saline, and then manually express the bladder and take the tube out and then watch the urethral stream as I press. And I don't know if this is scientifically valid and whether anyone else does that, but I would see in some patients a beautiful vertical coherent stream that was of nice caliber and looked, to all intents and purposes, normal. And in others, you might get the downward deflection, and then, this case actually needs a urethroplasty and a glans closure, and the other one I can just do the hemicirc.
Well, we've made a similar observation that some parents can look at their infants, and once we've mentioned it, they can say, yeah, his stream does deflect down or whatever, but the majority don't seem to know that. And yet, if you and during childhood, if you have somebody with an uncorrected hypospadias, during early childhood, the parents don't tend to notice anything different about the stream.
It does tend to come out in a compact way when they're young. There's something that happens as they get closer to puberty in terms of that configuration that the spraying will tend to start later on. And we don't have a magic age for it, but it was funny. The age in my mind that families tended to come in because of spraying was 8. And one day I said, what's the age you see that families complain that these uncorrected hypospadias guys start spraying? He said 8. And I was like, what is it? Because there's there's nothing from a gland size standpoint. I mean, if you look at gland size measurements, they change in the 0 to 3 month of age, the boys, and then they really don't change from 3 months up until they hit actual puberty. And it's fun looking at your graphs, even with the meatal. If you just locked off the pubertal kids, kind of that, 11, 12, 13, 14, it seems to me just from your pure numbers, I don't have the line, that you really wouldn't see much change in terms of that, meatal length or your glans closure length until you see that little spike up as they start to hit puberty and things grow from there. So 8 doesn't really make sense from an anatomic standpoint. And the only thing we could figure out was that by around age 8, the boys are now tall enough that the parents can see the pee all over the toilet. When they're 4 or 5, they're just tall enough where they're essentially putting their little penis right into the toilet. And so if it's spraying, no one's going to pick up on that because they're peeing directly into the toilet. So I think that's a little bit of a mystery. But it's also interesting that I think your thought is something that we see all the time in adult men who come in with distal hypospadias, like many of these that you see, very many of them have been circumcised. We see an occasional patient that still has the hooded prepuce, but many of them underwent a surgical procedure and under anesthesia to have the foreskin removed, and yet are still struggling with, spraying issues in 80% of them. So, whether or not they had any additional tests when they were infants and had that circumcision, I can't say, but it is something that we see in our adult patients. So we have another question about meatal stenosis.
Oh, I didn't see it.
It's right here. Meatal stenosis is, when it's iatrogenic, can you correct it with a ventral meatotomy as long as glans fusion remains above 2.5 millimeters? You want to tackle that?
Yes, but we don't do that. I mean, 2.5 is the threshold, and I wouldn't push that. I mean, I think it's better to stay up closer to normal. So we're going to talk about meatal stenosis in detail at another occasion. So just suffice it to say that in patients that we do meatotomy after hypospadias repair, that we do those dorsally. We make the incision dorsally because we don't want to do anything to upset a good glans closure. The exception to that is the occasional patient that we see where somebody is over exuberantly closed the glans and their closure is 6 or 7 or 8 in a child who has meiosis. Then we don't hesitate to cut down so that their closure would be 4 or 5 millimeters. But in somebody who's coming in with meatal stenosis with glans closure of 4, then we would not cut that one ventrally. Again, a good question and something we're going to talk about more later.
There's a question about papers mentioning Jacob Henley's septum or septum glandus, septum glandus, stating that it's embryologically is the septum glandus different from the penile urethra and that reconstructing the septum is essential for reconstructing, or rather than incising the midline because it might damage the upper median septum.
Yeah, so again, we're going to talk about surgical technique and key steps and all of that. And I'll just say it's a little bit out of the realm of what we're trying to address today. And
here's another question. that says, is there a graph of glans fusion length with age? So in Mr. Hutton's paper, you can certainly see that. Basically, from our data, we don't really see a major change from normal from that 3 months of age until after the age of 10. After the age of 10, now you start getting different tanner stages, and that makes it a little trickier. I don't have good data on the interim tanner stages between 10 and 15. But I can tell you that the adult typical glans fusion is about 10 millimeters.
So this is your data, Mr. Hutton, and on that, I mean, is there a comment to make about changes with age? Again, we just showed the glans closure. We didn't show meatal size.
I think it would have been nice to have had a bigger cohort of patients, probably, to see what the relationship, does it hold up? There does seem to be an increase. You know, you're saying 3 months to 10 years, but it does seem that it's slowly drifting up. But there is a scatter, you know, above and below that line, isn't there?
Yes.
And the length changes certainly between 3 months and 10 years old. And since we're talking about kind of the length of the meatus and the length of the glans, it is an interesting question whether or not you see that few millimeter change, at least in terms of glans width, though. Our study and multiple normative data studies that look at patient different ages of the circumference, for instance, of their glans, you don't see a change in the width of the glans. So.
Yeah, so we know if you want to convert these, maybe you said this and I just missed it a second ago, but when you go to Tanner 5, that measurement is the normal glans closure measures 10. So if 4 or 5 is normal in prepubertal, it's double that in adults. And the ones in between, when they're in puberty, we have measured some that were like 8, for example. But they move fairly rapidly from that 4 or 5 up to a maximum of 10. I don't know that we've really measured men over 10, although we haven't measured normal men, but in our repairs. And
we do know that men with uncorrected hypospadias, we had one that had a glans fusion of like 2.5. In an adult male, and that certainly was inadequate. He was having spraying, and that's why he wanted to be fixed. So that's a good question. Mr. Kim, maybe you want to comment. There's a question, what is the normal meatal length from the top to the bottom?
Actually, it says from the top to Boston. I presume.
I don't know. Boston, right. 5.4 millimeters, and there was one standard deviation either way was 1. So
here's a great question. What is our opinion about foreskin preservation, considering it as a normal feature? And I would say
Mr. Hutton answer. He's in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, early on in my career, I always did a circumcision, and that was fairly standard practice through my training in the UK, actually, for hypospadias. But the trend has gone more and more towards foreskin reconstruction. And it does obviously get you a normal appearance. And it's all down to parental preference, really, what they want and what fits in with their societal norm, I guess. There are some drawbacks of foreskin reconstruction in the fact, you know, the repair may break down in certain places, but normally aesthetically the results can be very pleasing.
Yeah, that's also exactly our experience, and we're going to, again, I keep saying we're going to talk about that. We are going to talk about that too, and I mean, really, it's kind of fun to just say that when you start talking about hypospadias, to talk about all of these things which we deal with on a routine basis and all of the questions that can arise from them, we've learned that if we gave a educational program and we talked for 8 hours a day for 3 days, people would still go away and say, well, they didn't even talk about that, you know? So you just can't. So that's why we decided that we would do this in a series of lectures, discussions. So every couple of weeks, we intend to do another one and try to focus the topics more. So these questions that people are asking, they're great, and we intend to cover them, but we want to talk about them in detail as separate standalone discussions and kind of keep things within each topic more or less. So, that's a great question. We should be, as surgeons doing reconstructive surgery, even in the United States, not everybody wants a circumcision. And so we believe that surgeons who do this, if you can fix a hypospadias, you can repair a foreskin. It's not that hard. And the fact that you weren't taught to do it, well, neither were we, and we do it. So, we'll discuss that. It's an important question, and it deserves more attention. So we will do that. Well, thanks everybody for coming, Mr. Hutton. Thank you so much for giving us some time from your busy retirement to talk about it.
Back to my garden now.
Yes. I'll just tell you my favorite just little joke about retirement was John Woodard. When he retired, I ran into him at a ski meeting. Actually, we were skiing, and I said to him, so how's retirement going? And he looked at me and he said, Warren, wow. How did he say it? He said, I have nothing to do and I can't get it all done.
I agree. Yeah. Busier than ever.
Busier than ever, can't get it all done. Exactly. So again, thanks so much. It was so interesting to hear how you came about this and as I say, I encourage everybody that hasn't become familiar with your paper to study it. It's just the data is so incredibly helpful. And again, thank you for giving us your perspective. Thank all of you who joined. If you enjoyed this, spread the word around, and we continue to do it, and people can look at it on YouTube. And I think this can be a good experience to help us draw closer together rather than continue to have great disparity, in our results and our recommendations.
And that will go so far for the families that all of us treat. So we hope that this will ultimately result in better results for them, whether it's from our surgical techniques to even the discussions that we have with them, not using trigger words like cosmetic or having objective criteria where 3 different surgeons can say, yep, you should have this, or no, you shouldn't, and here's the pros and cons of whichever one of those that you choose, because there are certainly those things regardless of whether or not a family chooses surgery. So.
All right. So we'll see everybody on, was August 7th, I think?
August 7th.
August 7th. We'll see y'all then. Bye-bye.
Thank you.